September 11th, a little after 3 o'clock. So I'm calling the Building Advisory Board meeting to order. First order of business, roll call. Start on my far right, say your name and come across.
Ryan White.
Mike McCall.
Kevin Cool.
Mark Frazier.
Dave Miller.
Mike Flory.
William McBride.
Scott Kraus.
Greg Nichols.
Rick Walters.
Next item, approval of the minutes of the August 14th meeting.
I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. New business. I'll refer to staff.
You'll have got a staff report on this. It's doesn't need any official action on you guys' part today. Just wanted discussion on it when we develop our policy for permitting and things like that for lawn irrigation systems. Of course, you know, back in March, the City Commission passed on second reading the ordinance requiring licensing for lawn irrigation landscaping contractors. At that time, staff has been in the process of implementing a permitting policy for lawn landscape contractors. In order for a company to install lawn landscape irrigation system in the state of Salina, the company or contractor must be licensed by a specialty lawn irrigation contractor. Class A, B, C contractors cannot install these systems without the separate specialty lawn landscape irrigation license. Permits are requested by and issued to the licensed landscape irrigation contractor. The contractor provides the permit project number to the plumber. At the time of the permit request, the contractor must declare the name of a licensed plumbing contractor who will be installing the backflow prevention device. When installation is complete, installation will be requested by the city staff to inspect the backflow preventer. No other inspections are required for the installation of the system. Currently, irrigation systems that obtain water from a private well, a backflow preventer is not required. The discussion topics for today is if an irrigation system is installed in the city on a private well, should a permit be required since no inspections will be performed? And then the second part is a irrigation license required if no permit is required, or if there is, and just kind of wanted some discussion on that and what you guys' thoughts were about it.
I talked to one of the contractors today, or one of the sprinkler guys, and I think that even if it's on a well, they need to pull a permit. I mean, because if they don't, it's kind of defeating the purpose of why we started this in the first place, even if it doesn't require a backflow preventer, in which, to me, I think it ought to have a backflow preventer on it anyway, because whatever it is, it's going back into the city aquifer.
Right.
So, you know, that's another discussion, but I think for now, they do need a permit, even if it's on a well, and I would like to see, you know, backflow preventers put on those.
Right. You know, like I said, currently that's not the law. I can't say I completely disagree with you, because we kind of all get our water from the same spot. However, that at that time it's not city-owned utility service, so we don't. At this time, we don't have a requirement for that. I have talked with the county about that and about, you know, wells and everything else, and they don't require them either.
Well, I think it's a state thing too. But like I say, the sprinkler guy I talked to, he would assume that he has to pull a permit even if it's on a well.
Right. And as of yet, we haven't made anybody. But yesterday was the first day of this whole thing anyway. So anyway, I didn't know if anybody else if had any thoughts about this. So you think permits should be required even if we don't do any inspections on it?
So did I hear correctly that even if they're not on a city grid, the licensed contractor would still have to pull a permit?
That's the question today.
Well, that's what I'm asking you is, if they're a licensed contractor, are they going to have to pull a permit no matter what they do, if it's on a well system or on a city system? I thought you said that it's not required currently.
The backflow preventer is not required.
The backflow and electrical are two different things, but I'm
But there's-
saying are
But
they,
even on a well, they're still gonna require electrical, so they need to pull a permit.
Well, yeah, that's a separate deal, and we do get permits for that, but that's really not associated with the irrigation system. If somebody goes in and pulls a permit, I want to drill a well, then, okay, that's a separate deal. It's not necessarily part of this lawn landscape irrigation
Right,
thing.
but I think with them having to pull a permit, the guys that are licensed that can pull them, it protects them, just like it was designed to do in the first place. So if we don't do that on wells, I think we're making a big mistake.
Okay.
If they don't have to pull a permit, then a non-licensed contractor could put it in, right? You've got no way of saying, okay, even though you don't pull a permit, you have to be licensed to do this.
Right. And
The
that
only way
was-
you control that is if they pull a permit, right?
well, that was part B of the question. If a permit, whether or not a permit is required, if you guys say yes, then fine, then they would have to be licensed. But the question was, if we didn't think that a permit was required, since we weren't doing any inspections on it, does the lawn irrigation contractor have to be licensed even if it's on a well? But if you guys are thinking that yes, permits should be required to put them in on for wells, then the licensing, I mean, the second question kind of answers itself, because you can't pull a permit if you're not licensed.
unless you're the homeowner.
Well, yeah, true. Yeah, a contractor can't pull a permit. Yeah, right. Okay.
Do we need to take a vote on this?
No, it's not a actionable thing, really. It was just, you guys brought it up, so I thought I'd kind of bring it before you guys before we drafted our policy on it, and just wanted to get you guys' input.
Because at this time, Sean, if I understand this correctly, the plumbing contractor is pulling the permit for the backflow prevention device, and that's the only thing you're,
No, the landscape lawn irrigation contractor is pulling the permit. He's listing the plumber as a sub on his permit.
but the reason he's pulling that permit is because of the backflow prevention device, correct? He has to list the
That
plumbing
was-
contractor?
Yes, that was part of the reason why.
You're not actually inspecting his system at this time, are you?
The
The
irrigation system?
No.
No, but part of it was to make sure that we have qualified people out there installing
No. Right.
sprinkler systems, and that's why this licensing came around, that they'd be licensed and pull permits. And I think it's a good thing.
But is the permit at this time for the irrigation system or for the backflow prevention device?
It's for the whole system, backflow prevention included.
And you're saying on a well, since it doesn't require the backflow prevention device,
Right.
do you still want a permit?
Basically, we'd be issuing a permit and not doing any inspections for it.
Because
So-
at this time, what you're inspecting is not the irrigation system, but
Right.
the backflow prevention device,
Right.
and that permit is pulled
And I
by
think
the sprinkler
Yes.
contractor, yet he has a qualified, or he has a licensed contracting plumbing contractor doing
Right.
it.
Or electrician
Okay.
if need
yeah,
be.
and, yeah,
Or
and
if he needs
electrician.
electrical the
Yeah.
same way, right,
And I
okay.
think that the reasoning, part of the reasoning for the board for wanting the testing done is because for one reason we don't do inspections for the irrigation system, and then wanted to make sure that we had qualified individuals installing them.
Correct, I see the
So-
value of the licensing.
Sure.
Yeah. But so then, hypothetically, you got a well in town, you have them come out, they're gonna have to have that permit for the electrical.
Well, the well permit was a whole separate thing from the irrigation system. That's a whole separate contractor and whole deal.
Right, but still, the sprinkler system will have to be hooked up to power, so they're
Right.
gonna have to have electrician
Yeah,
involved.
the electrical for
Even
that.
if it's a well.
Right.
So that's why I think, they should have to pull permits. And it's just a good thing all the way around, and then it's covered.
I would agree with that. I would consider making some sort of an inspection mandatory on every one of these, though, because so where this could be an issue would be an existing well that's been used manually for years and years and years. So the irrigation contractor can throw a pump start relay on there in order to make an automatic system, and that would not then be inspected at that point. And so many of these old wells have poorly maintained electrical supplies to them, or poorly done to begin with, and they're not safe to be even turning on. So I would kind of push towards maybe just a final, go just a quick walk through, make sure you don't see anything like that as part of the inspection.
Okay.
We see a lot of wells with just a piece of Romex going in the top of them, and
Yeah, I've pulled a well and got hit with 220 with it wet, and it doesn't feel good.
and there's no ground fault protection for safety of personnel. It's, traditional wiring, and
He thought he had it off, and it wasn't.
you don't want to be pulling a well pump and get hit with that.
Okay. That's a good point. We'll,
'Cause there are a lot of existing wells that people for 30 years have just ran a hose off of, and
okay.
I have a question on procedure. We have a member of the audience that would like to speak. Can I call him forward now?
Sure.
Okay.
Just a couple questions. When they put the wells in, don't they have to have a permit to put the well in? I mean, I don't know if that's county or what.
Yeah,
but
we don't
the well
issue, we
people-
don't issue the well permits. The only thing we issue is standalone electrical for the well.
Right. So, I mean, there is a permit for the well itself, but I understand what you're saying. But also, is there isn't there a backflow somewhere in that well, or not the pump?
typically there's
Yeah,
a check valve on the top of the pump down at the bottom of the casing.
That's right.
But
That's just my question.
those are not exactly great for irrigation wells. There's a lot of sand and stuff that gets pumped through them, and those they don't
close.
close very well.
But I will talk to them about that. Just kind of doing a well check.
Yeah, well check.
For those systems. That's a good point. Okay. Is there any other discussion on this matter?
Hearing none, we're ready to move to 3.2.
Okay. This one's regarding DWV testing. Got a little bit of background here. Several contractors have contacted me about Section 712 of the 2012 UPC. The section talks about testing of sanitary drainage pipes. Previously, in the 2006 UPC, there was a local amendment omitting the requirement for testing of PVC DWV piping. But in the code adoption of 2016, that amendment was deleted. Plumbers have asked me for alternate methods of testing for use mainly in the wintertime, as Section 712 does not allow for an air test for PVC, only water. I've called some neighboring communities regarding their practices on this. Concordia, Manhattan, and Hayes, water testing only. And then Wichita, they do have a local amendment to allow for 5 PSI tests with a 30-pound gauge, very similar to what we do for gas piping. After some discussion and research, an alternative acceptable to the city would be a smoke test. There is still some talk from the plumbing community to want to allow air testing like Wichita does, or bring back the previous amendment excluding PVC testing altogether. But that would require a local amendment, since the UPC requires testing of DWV and specifically prohibits air testing of PVC. There are pros and cons for using air instead of water. And I'm sure you guys are aware of a lot of those, and we can kind of bring those up as we go along here. But again, no official action is required today. We're just kind of kicking this around to see what you guys may or may not be in favor of. Amendment proceedings may follow this, but today we're just kind of kicking it around, discussing to see what your thoughts are on the matter. Should the city amend the code to bring back the 2006 amendment granting relief from testing of PVC DWV piping? And the second part, should the city amend the code to allow for air testing similar to what Wichita does? And I'll let you guys have at it.
I think we ought to go back to letting the air tests be done when it's colder out. I'm fine with the water, but when you get into wintertime and you're getting into those cold temperatures and filling all that pipe up, you're going to have to, one of two things. You're either going to have to pour a bunch of antifreeze in them, RV antifreeze or something to keep them from freezing. You're going to have water and P-traps. I'm not a big fan of the air. I mean, if you don't get your caps on tight and stuff, you can't have one blow off. 5 pounds isn't a whole lot of air. I mean, it's not going to hurt somebody unless they got their face over the top of a pipe when they're airing it up. But we do need to do something about it in the wintertime because filling them full of water is not going to fly, especially if you got a big building, you know, like the commercial buildings I do. You're going to have a lot of problems trying to get them drained down. So I would say, you know, after, you know, maybe starting November 1st or something, or when the temperature starts dropping, we go to air testing. When it warms back up, we go back to water.
I personally would be opposed to air testing. I did see that you said something about possibly smoke test. I think that would be fine.
Could I ask you why? I'm not that familiar with all this. What's the drawbacks to air testing?
Well, it's a danger issue. It's a safety issue.
To who? To whom is it a danger? 5 pounds is nothing.
There's been issues, and I think most manufacturers would agree, especially in cold weather where you have more brittle fixtures, as you can have an explosive discharge that can actually, and it can blow shards, and that would be the problem. I've air tested before, but that would be why I wouldn't want to go against the industry or the manufacturers or the UPC on a life safety issue. Even though it seems minimal, the chances are low, but it does happen, and that's why I would be opposed to it. And especially with cold weather, because that's when you really have, I don't know, most plumbers, if they've been out in the field, can see you have a PVC fitting and you might drop it on the ground. When it's in the summer, it might just bounce around. In the summertime, you can actually have, in the winter, it can shatter. And if you have an explosion, you have that sharp shard flying out at you, something along those lines, or a cap. It can be a danger.
I've been doing the air testing and for years, just for my own personal thing. I've not had a problem. I've never had any pipe burst, not one time.
Doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
I'm not going to say it doesn't happen, but you can walk out and trip over the curb and break your arm too.
Well, there's more than 5 pounds in a bottle of pop.
I'm just saying, I guess my problem is if you're doing big jobs and doing new work, whether it's homes or commercial work, there's got to be a better way of testing than water or trying to put smoke in something that's underground. It's not going to work.
I know that head pressure, water testing would be a hassle. I mean, none of us like to do it. None of us ever have.
I don't have a problem with it as long as it's not freezing cold out. We've been doing the water testing. I don't have a problem with it. I'm putting in a building for myself. I just water tested it. I mean, I think it's a good idea that we're testing the waste pipe instead of just, you know, letting it go and saying, hey, I know I glued that.
I don't like going against the code, making a local amendment that it's on a safety issue.
And is it on a safety issue? And is that why the UPC said, no, we're not going to allow because of life safety?
Yes.
Then I agree with him.
Because
we can't go against life safety.
The thing is, you can do a local amendment like Wichita has that say the testing requirement is 5 pounds. But I know for a fact that whenever I went out in the field and my inspectors still go out on tests that require 10 pounds or whatever else, a lot of times there's a lot more in there than that. So, you know, you can't rely on a certain plumber only airing it to 5 pounds.
Well, whoever's doing that should be
right. They're not right. I mean, I'm not saying because we don't allow air testing now, so it's not necessarily for that. But I mean, for any test,
one of two things.
For water, for gas, for anything, it's a 10 pound test.
We water test when it's warm enough. We don't test at all when it's not.
Or another scenario is they put it up to 5 pounds. There's a leak. Well, you don't know where that leak is. So layer it up a little bit more so they can hear it, listen for it, or whatever else. That's what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about 5 pounds. I'm worried about more pressure than that.
Yeah, if you got 5 pounds on it and you soap the joints, if you know you got a leak and you soap them, you find it. I'm 5 pounds.
Well, I mean, in my world,
in electrical, you know, if we're working around something that has an arc flash or a risk of life safety, then we have to wear our appropriate equipment. You know, face shields, long sleeve shirts. I mean, see that as an alternative to not having a test. Wear safety equipment.
If the city went ahead and allowed the air testing, then the city would be liable if something happened. Is that not correct?
I think our liability is limited on as far as code things like that go, and even on inspections, our liability is pretty limited. However, I don't know that it's a great idea. Just, I mean, I don't know if you've
To go back and amend something that was taken out of the code and we put it back in now, that's kind of a different story, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you guys can recommend what you want, and we can still go
amend
through the
anything.
process, and that's not I don't have a problem with that at all. I mean, I'm not gonna.
But there again, I'm not for, one of your options was go back and leave the amendment, or put the amendment back in that the DWV system doesn't have to be tested.
Right.
I've always found that a very disservice to the community and the owner. I mean, if you're going to pay for the system, you ought to get it to where you know it's not going to be dripping, having mold collecting in walls, and people just in the practical world, people will dry fit, they'll go to lunch, they'll forget, they come back, hey, they thought it was glued, it wasn't that joint, and now it's sheetrocked, everything. 2 years later, they start seeing that. What the heck is that on my ceiling?
Just make everybody go to purple primer.
Then you're putting it all on the inspector that the primer was there. You still don't know for sure if it was sealed correctly, if they had enough glue. The water test takes care of all that.
But you can't water test when it's zero. I mean, how many big systems do you test?
When I was doing commercial work, I did
I
just
know,
as big
I'm
a
just saying
systems as
when
you've
you were,
ever
but
done.
you don't
So
have to do it now.
If you got to
so
test, you got to
I'm trying
test.
to figure out.
You can use,
It's going to cost more to water test in the wintertime if we got to fill them full of antifreeze.
If they're going to let you do the smoke test, what's wrong with the smoke test? Very low pressure. If it just minimal cross pressure, and you have a little smoke. The industry approves it. They're okay with it. Your plastic
You
manufacturers
still got to force
approve
it in there, and if you don't have enough pressure behind that, how are you going to force it out the joints?
What's that, on the smoke test?
Yes.
It does have slight pressure, about 1 inch water column, not very much. It's just got a fan that's on there that's keeping enough to where it'll blow the smoke out.
I can't
It's not,
see that finding leaks like air or water.
It's not as good as water. Those would be my opinions. I just hate to go against the model code and against the manufacturers.
So if we did water all
of
the time with the
piping.
option for smoke in the wintertime?
I'd let them smoke anytime if that's what they really want to
Smoke
do.
anytime,
If
water
the test is
anytime?
adequate and they want to go the smoke route, you are making, well, though, I'd prefer it just be water straight up, and you can use antifreeze if you need to. If you had to have something that, there's just no way we're going to do it, I would rather see the smoke be an unusual situation. Just kind of your stop loss situation, but I sure wouldn't be okay with an air test or no test.
Okay.
Maybe what we need to do is invite some of the plumbers in and hear what they have to say.
I mean, if we want to, go forward with a.
Marksman Plumbing. We've added up for the builders and stuff how much cost for all this stuff to like air test it or the water test and stuff, and I'm checking into a smoke machine now. Just to air test now with all the fittings that we have between the underground and up and out the roof, we're running around $750. I know another plumber's up to $1,000, and the builders are just raising heck with us for the cost of doing all this. The water, I think, is crazy to do in the wintertime for sure, but then if you do water testing, if you don't have water on the lot right then and there, like we do an underground, and then we do the sewer and water next, it takes the city to get out there a couple days before they put a meter on for us to get water to the house, or we buy a big 500-gallon tank and haul water and pay for water, and then charge the builder for that too. I was looking into the smoke machine. The smoke machine is probably about a little over 600 just for the smoke machine. And I could probably deal with the smoke machine if the builders can deal with it. But they're raising heck by the price that we have to charge for everything that we're doing to it now. Can't we test? I know Charlotte Pipe Company said they wouldn't test it, let you test it above 5 pounds. Can't we test it at like 2.5 pounds? I think that was their limit.
I think, Mark, the code reads just air pressure on plastic pipe is prohibited, and I think Charlotte's the same way.
Yeah, but it's so few and far between. I just think you're...
I hear what you're saying.
Hmm?
I
But
mean,
I'm just saying, the cost that we're adding to every time I give to a plumber, I give him a bid for a house or something, or to a contractor, then I turn around and say, well, no, we're air testing now, we're water testing, we're doing smoke tests now, that'll be another $750.
I remember that. I mean, I remember when, and I feel for you, Mark, I remember when that exemption was actually brought in. I remember a lot of people lobbying for that at the time. I'm sure a lot of people in the industry and understand. I get it. I don't want to do it either, and it's an additional cost, and every time there's a cost, the builder, he's got to try to pass that on, and he doesn't, this is where...
Yeah.
But is it of value? I've seen a lot of homes, being on the service side now, I've seen a lot that I go into a relatively new home, and there's leaking pipe on a new home on their DWV system. Really?
Well, I believe it could be
Really?
tested.
$250,000
I would think I would like to see if we can still air test it at a lower pressure, or see if we can do the smoke test on it. Either way, it's still going to raise the cost of this house up for this builder.
Either way it does.
And that's what they're screaming at us about, that
Right.
we can't do nothing about.
The only way to avoid that is to go back and say, hey, we're just not going to test those DWV systems here in Salina.
I've done it for 35 years that way.
I understand. I remember.
If it leaks, we still got to go
understand.
back and fix it. We got to cut sheetrock out. We got to pay for the sheetrock to be patched.
Sometimes those leaks don't show up for years.
Especially when you get in commercial, if you've got one that's under slab, you've got concrete, you've got a mess to get to if you've got a leaking pipe underneath the slab. So from my point of view, I would want the testing, whether it's water and smoke option for wintertime. I think I could probably live with that.
That's still going to add to it if we have to water test through the spring and fall.
It adds to it, but to take it out like they had before, I wouldn't agree with that.
And I would
be tested.
I would agree with you. I think if it was that cold weather, we're going to smoke, leave it. I guess I would be okay with that too.
Yeah, because they require water testing in the code. And like I say, I have no problem with it. We just can't use water in the wintertime because it's not going to be a good thing. I mean, if we have to use smoke in the wintertime, I'm fine with that. But to have to go in there and fill up a big system, if I've got something that has rain drains and everything else in it, and go in there and fill that up with some kind of antifreeze-based solution, it's going to cost a fortune.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to have to figure out somewhere to pump that stuff out.
And especially if the builder does have water on the lot, and we turn around and fill everything up with water a couple different times, if you have a leak or something else like that, and this builder gets this bill for the water, somebody's going to have to pay for it. If I pay for it, I have to charge you for it, right?
Someone's going to pay for the additional cost. That is correct.
That's what I'm just
What's the
saying.
difference in cost between smoke and water? I mean, if you were allowed to use smoke all the time, what would you think?
I don't know the cost of the water.
You
Mark
said the
could
machine
probably-
was $600. Is there a big cost to buying the smoke or whatever?
It's I don't know what the cost of the smoke machine is. Probably cost to be about $700. Then you're going to use so many smoke bombs per house, which would be about $50 for smoke bombs per house.
Okay, so you're looking at maybe a couple $100 per house instead of 1,000 or 700, whatever
Well,
you
but
said.
you got
water.
time and labor plus all
Sure.
the plugs that you have to put in and extra T's you got to put in and time.
Caps on the vents
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it all adds up. I mean, whether you put smoke in it, probably really, if you have water handy, the smoke's going to cost you more because you had to buy the machine. You got to get something out of that machine every time you use it. I mean, it's just,
No,
that's the way it is.
That's the way you want us to do it, we gotta do it that way.
Right. But the water, I mean, if you have the water there, the water's not a big cost.
And there's a lot of jobs we don't have water on.
Right, no, I understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's probably a real, you know, that creates a real problem in the wintertime, because even if they run a water service in, they can't turn the water on to the house until, you know, it's enclosed where they've got heat in it, or they're going to have a freezing problem with that. So, you know, in the wintertime, even the guys doing houses, they're going to have to use smoke, or, you know, there's got to be some, or air, one of the two.
Do you need a consensus from, what do you need from us? It appears we've got opinions
Well-
varying.
Really, this was just kind of a discussion time, so that if, I'm not going to propose an amendment to amend the code. A plumber, or if one of you guys want to, you can do that. So basically, it was just discussion point today to see if it was even viable, if it would even pass here. And so I don't necessarily need a vote. I mean, if you guys want to, you know, discuss and think, you know, what you might approve or what you might think is okay, but it doesn't really require any action today. It was just kind of to run through to see if any different ideas would be met, how that would be met by the board.
So like, do you want an unofficial vote on whether air would be okay?
If you want to do that,
Otherwise,
that'd be acceptable. Like I say, it's non-binding or anything, but just kind of an idea of by someone who might want to apply for a code amendment change, how it might be received. So if you want to do kind of an unofficial thing, that'd be appropriate.
okay, let's do an unofficial vote to begin with on air. How many, well, okay.
Before we vote, can I ask a question of the plumbers on this, because I really don't know? If you do an air test on these, the PVC systems, and it doesn't shatter or blow up, what will the manufacturer do if they found out? Like, you tested it, you pumped it full of 12 pounds or something. Does it void a warranty with that? I don't know if they even have them. Do you know of anything?
I thought there was some plastic companies that would allow you to air test up to 5 pounds.
And I don't know if there's any way they'll know if you did more than 5 pounds or not, but like Sean was saying, if you pump more air because you think, I can't find this leak, I'm not saying
Right.
you should do that.
But the thing is, if you put 5 pounds on it, which, you know, that's what's legal, and you air test it like that, if you have a leak, the gauge is going down, my guys soap everything.
That's the way you find stuff.
Right.
I mean,
We don't listen for an air leak. We don't put 100 pounds on it and go, well, it's whistling over there.
That's funny, but you never know if someone might try that.
right. But so if it doesn't break the part, shatter it, does it deform the part in some way that the manufacturer? But if you're only putting 5 pounds.
Well, and the thing is, when the inspector gets there, we mark our gauges at 5 pounds, and that gauge has to be on 5 pounds. The inspector doesn't want to walk in there and see it over 5 or under 5. So I make sure, you know, my guys have it aired up to 5 pounds and make sure it's staying there before we call in for an inspection. And I've never had one fitting or one piece of pipe, any problems with anything blowing up while we've been doing that.
We haven't either. We always call our inspections in for our air test at the same time the inspector can be there. We make sure it's good first before he gets there, but we're there when the inspector shows up to see that he's seen the 5 pounds of air on it.
Right.
So in New York City, apparently they have a fourth or another alternative. They call it the peppermint test. You put 2 ounces of peppermint oil in the system along with 10 quarts of hot water, and then the inspectors to go to all places to smell for peppermint.
Better than what you could.
Kind of unique, but it's an option.
If you had asthma, it'd be a problem.
Yeah.
Generally, people have colds in the wintertime, though.
The peppermint cleared up. Hey, I can smell. So, yeah. They have water tightness, gas tightness, smoke test, and the peppermint test, New York City. That's the only other one I see available.
Well, do we have any more discussion on air? I hope I state this properly. All those that would be opposed of amending the code to allow, all those that would be opposed to allowing air by amendment, raise your right hand. Does everybody understand what they're voting on? In other words, if you don't want to allow air, then raise your right hand.
If you don't.
If you do not want to allow air, in other words,
An air test.
an air test by amending the code, if you don't want to allow that, raise your right hand. All those that would allow it, amend the code, allow it, raise your right hand. So, there you go.
Okay. Well, if, I mean, that kind of gives.
I would think if Wichita allows it, you know, they wouldn't be allowing it if they're having a lot of problems with it.
Right, and like I say, I only called those 4 cities. Like Wichita was the only one that did, but they did, and I didn't have a chance to call 10 places or whatever. I just kind of called those 4. So, but okay, well that's
Just for, never mind. I withdraw that question.
okay. Well, that's good. That's good information. If I get a, code amendment request soon, I can get working on that. Maybe by next month, but we'll see when if anybody
Mark,
does.
would you
For
be
now, the
interested
rules
in
are still
doing
the same.
a code amendment request to get air? If you get with Sean or Debbie, they can probably get you paperwork.
You can't. The code is what it is now.
Winter's coming, buddy.
Yeah. the code is what it is now. So I mean, I can't. Until then, I can't. No.
So hurry with your paperwork.
If that's all of that, then we can move on to.
Smoke test now, Sean?
Yes. I guess I'll let you do the next item on the agenda.
Annual business meeting.
Our annual business meeting pretty much just consists of electing officers. The board's September meeting is generally the annual business meeting of the Building Advisory Board and the time for selection of new officers. The membership for the Building Advisory Board is now 1 short of full complement of 11 appointed members, missing an open position of mechanical contractor. In August, the mayor appointed Mark Frazier, David Miller, Kevin Kuhl to the board. Mr. Miller and Mr. Frazier are holdover members. The annual business meeting involves election of board chairman and vice chairman for the coming year. David Miller has served 2 consecutive terms as chairman, and Mike Frazier has served 2 terms as vice chairman.
He hasn't even been here.
What's that?
I said Mike hasn't even
Oh,
been here.
sorry.
not even
I
one
wrote that
meeting.
down. Sorry. I got that down wrong.
We need to get him out.
Yeah.
I think that's in the bylaws, isn't it?
But on some other boards, there is term limits on who can be chairman and vice chairman. The Building Advisory Board does not have one, so you guys can vote, nominate, and elect who you see fit.
Well, I would just like to say that I've enjoyed this position, and if you'll have me, I'd be willing to do it again.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Vice Chairman, Mr. Frazier's done a wonderful job.
that Mike or
Are you,
Mark?
I think it's Mark.
I apologize
Mike or Mark, but
apologize
anyway.
for the typo.
Would you be willing to serve again?
That'd be fine. Looks like we're together for another 4 years.
I'd like to nomination. Anyone for Mike to be vice chair? Or Mark.
We're going to get Mike on this.
Here's why, because your brother and I used to always argue a lot, and we had a little argument here, and so, Mike. Oh, no, wait a minute, Mark. Mark, I'd like to nominate him for vice chair.
A motion to approve.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anything else we need to do? Is that it? Okay.
That is it.
Number 4, unfinished and other business, house flipper amendment, which is a very interesting subject.
It's kind of what we talked, something we talked about last week, or last month. I have not had a chance to craft language yet for that, and so I put it on their table to probably next month. I'm hoping to get back to that then at that time. I know we talked about extending the time frame out from 12 months between permits that a person can do. But if there was any other comments or you guys want to talk about that, we can. But I just hadn't had a chance to write up the amendment language for that.
Well, from what I remember from the discussion, basically, I think everybody wants it stopped somehow.
Right.
And to me, the simplest way still is if somebody does that and violates what they're supposed to do, then it's mandatory before they get a permit the second time that they have the license, period. They just can't do it without having the appropriate license.
Right. And we had, there was one that happened not that long ago, and we didn't require them to have a license, but they had to get a licensed contractor in order to do the job. So
That's always an alternative,
yeah.
Okay, moving on. Public forum. We have anybody from the public that would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 6, adjournment. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just before you do that, I need to get back with Russ from Earth Care, or I guess it's Landscape Consultants now. Or starting now, are you going to require him to, he's getting ready to do a well job, that he pulls a permit?
Yes.
Okay, I'll let him know that. Thank you.
I move we adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.